Early Sunday morning in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, police were once again the target of what appears to be and is being described as an ambush-style attack. There was a gunman who had his face covered and was wearing all black, who opened fire from Hammond Air Plaza, a local shopping center, after 9 a.m. Some people are saying that there was a 911 call about that person, some people believing that it was put in by that person or an accomplice, something to that effect. During the attack, 6 officers were shot. 3 of them were tragically killed. This is, of course, coming on the wake of the Dallas attacks, where 5 police officers were killed just about a week ago. The police officers who were killed were Baton Rouge Police Officer Montrell Jackson, Officer Matthew Gerald, and Sheriff's Deputy Brad Garofalo. The man who was killed in a shootout with police is believed to have been the only shooter. Many people were worried that there was an active shooter situation in the wake of that ambush. The police have come out and said that they do not believe that is the case. That person has been identified as an active member of the New Freedom Group, an anti-government group. And we've seen in the past, over the past 5 years plus, ambush-style attacks against police officers, one of the preferred tactics of these anti-government groups. They will call in for police to come to their home, EMS to come to their home, and then they will attack them. This appears to be one of those sorts of attacks. Now, one of perhaps the most tragic elements of this killing is that one of the police officers who was killed, that's Montrell Jackson, had, right after the death of Alton Sterling, had posted on social media a message about what he felt in the wake of the police brutality, the reaction of the community. And so we want to read a portion of that message to you. And so I've got it right here. He says, "I'm tired physically and emotionally, disappointed in some family, friends, and officers for some reckless comments, but hey, what's in your heart is in your heart. I still love you all because hate takes too much energy, but I definitely won't be looking at you the same. Thank you to everyone that has reached out to me and my wife. It was needed and much appreciated. I swear to God, I love this city, but I wonder if this city loves me." And this is where he gets into the struggle that he's experiencing. "In uniform, I get nasty, hateful looks, and out of uniform, some consider me a threat. I've experienced so much in my short life, and these last 3 days have tested me to my core. When people you know begin to question your integrity, you realize they don't really know you at all. Look at my actions, they speak loud and clear. Finally, I personally want to send prayers out to everyone directly affected by this tragedy." And remember, again, he's talking about the death of Alton Sterling here, not about the police officers being killed. "These are trying times. Please don't let hate infect your heart. This city must and will get better. I'm working in these streets, so any protesters, officers, friends, family, or whoever, if you see me and need a hug or want to say a prayer, I got you." And that is exactly the sort of police officer, at least from these statements, from what we've heard from family members and friends, that we want out there trying to make the system better, trying to make the police better. And it's a double tragedy, no matter what. Police officers being killed in this way, tragedy. But that someone who is directly working to make things better, for him to be killed in these attacks so soon after Alton Sterling, it's just even more tragic.
Montrell Jackson is an excellent reason that as we talk about all the time, why you should never, ever, ever do senseless violence. Because, look, I've given 1,000 examples of this. You shouldn't need any examples of it. But there is no killing the right person. And you almost always kill the wrong person, even by your own definition, when you are going to seek whatever you think is vengeance. Montrell Jackson is, unfortunately, the epitome of what this violence has led to, the victims of this violence. He was victimized in every way. He says, as a black man, when he didn't have his uniform on, he felt scared of what might happen to him. And when he had his uniform on, he was scared of what people thought of him as a cop. And then he was killed by someone in serving as a cop. So don't ever do violence. It's so monumentally stupid. Now, this guy, Gavin Long, who apparently was a shooter. Well, as with most of these shooters, and I read this great article about assassins on Huffington Post, they're totally and utterly confused. Now, that shouldn't be surprising because they do insane things like shoot innocent people. So in his case, he was part of the New Freedom Group, apparently, an anti-government group. He hated police violence, but I guess maybe it's not contradictory because this is a group that is afraid of government power and they're right-wing, but they also don't want the, I guess in their language, the jackbooted thugs of the government or the police, etc. But whatever his insane thoughts were, and assassins are always, like I said, it's a really interesting study. I'll just give you one quick example. The guy who shot George Wallace, he actually was indifferent towards George Wallace. He hated Nixon the most. He wanted to shoot McGovern the most, even though he liked McGovern the most, and wound up killing George Wallace, who he was indifferent to.
Shooting,
you know why?
Shooting, not killing.
Sorry, that's right. Shooting. Wallace survived.
Arthur Bremer.
Yeah, because assassins are nuts.
Yeah.
And so they're not part of any movement. They're not. And by the way, I'm not just talking about the Black Lives Matter movement. It's not fair to the right-wing movements to say that this guy represents them and is part of what every person who's afraid of the government would do, or who's concerned about big government. That's not what they all do. Of course not.
Well, I think that what you're doing right now is touching on something that I don't think gets talked about enough when it comes to covering Black Lives Matter or police officials. Look, I know that it's very easy and it's human nature to just paint everything as black and white, right? You're either all in or you're all out. You're either with them or you're against them. And that's the way a lot of these stories get talked about. So you're either 100% in favor of the cops or you're 100% against the cops. No, but there are gradations, right? There are situations where cops abuse their power. And when you call them out on that, that is justified. You want reform. You don't want violence against them.
Yeah.
Same with Black Lives Matter. One violent person is not representative of an entire movement, but simple-minded individuals want to just just paint a broad picture of an entire movement or an entire group of people. And that's a really big problem, because when you have someone who's unhinged, right, and they hear that type of rhetoric, it's going to push them to do violent things.
Yeah, we can't be more clear to what Anna says. I mean, this guy was not affiliated with Black Lives Matter.
He did. Gavin Long, not remotely.
Not even remotely, nor was Micah Johnson. This guy did. I mean, the Southern Poverty Law Center had never heard of one of the groups he claimed to belong to, but did recognize that one of the groups did exist. I don't think there was a link firmly established that he was actually part of that group. I don't know. He did identify with Micah Johnson. He clearly felt there had been injustices against black people and wanted to hurt police as a result. He may not have cared that he killed a black cop. But either way, it doesn't make any difference. He was a crazy person who wanted to hurt cops, identified with Micah Johnson, thought what Micah Johnson did was the right thing to do. He had multiple motivations, but in no way was he involved with Black Lives Matter. In fact, he said protesting doesn't do anything. That was one of his...
And by the way, I mean,
whereas killing innocent lives, to protest the killing of innocent lives, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's not a mixed message. That was one of the core arguments against capital punishment. But frustrating. No, it's not. It's not the answer. It not only doesn't pursue your goal, but it makes it harder for other people to carry on towards your goal. And we know one of the main reasons that police in this country do, unfortunately, shoot before they should is fear.
Yep.
What better way to instill fear in cops than to ambush and kill multiples? This will probably lead to other unnecessary killings.
We're here in Cleveland, and so yesterday, Sunday, the police in Cleveland asked Governor John Kasich to rescind open carry laws, right? So that because they didn't want people walking around the protest zones with guns, and they said, and it was very telling. They were like, one cop said, I think the chief of police, when upon seeing a guy with whatever he had, an AR-15, the kind of weapon we've seen too often and used too often in terrible tragedies, the kind of gun, I would argue, no civilian in America ever needs to own. The cop said, hey, look, in case you haven't figured this out, we're on edge. They were on edge before for understandable reasons, just because the Republican National Convention is here and there are protests and there are angry, hot-headed people in the same place. Understandable just for that to be police on edge. Then you add that over the last week, 8 police officers have been ambushed and murdered. And of course they're on edge. It's the most human thing in the world to be on edge. And then this guy's out there with his AR-15 saying, hey, I've never been arrested. It's my constitutional right, and I think it's critical that I demonstrate that right. And I got it. He does have that right. But that is I can't think of a bigger jackbag move than showing up with your AR-15 when you know cops are on edge, and you know they're on edge for a goddamn good reason.
Yeah.
And so, use some basic, not just common sense, to protect yourself. Use some sense of common decency to these guys who, we all want civilian review boards. We all want cops who commit murder to be held accountable for it. That will keep other cops from doing it. We all want police to follow what's being done by the chief of police in Richmond, California, by the chief of police in Dallas, Texas, David Brown, who want legitimate police reform. We all want that. And we all recognize that on top of that, these cops risk their lives every day. So all of those things, none of those things are incompatible. All of those things can be, the problems can be fixed. They can be fixed with meaningful reform, and showing up with your AR-15 only undermines that whole process.
Yeah.
And at its worst point, and at a point that could be combative and could cause the loss of life for innocent people, including you.
One last thing. Part of the reason that cops shoot more Americans is because more Americans are armed. So in Europe, they don't often resort to lethal force, but partly because, and I'm not excusing the excessive use of police force in America. Anybody who watches our show knows that I don't in any way excuse that. But is that the cops in Europe know that it's very unlikely for the assailant to have a gun on him. So very unlikely to cause a lethal harm to him.
Yeah.
Whereas in America, almost everybody's got a gun.
Yeah.
So every cop is taught, watch out, everybody's got a gun and they could kill you at any time. And then you add on top of that these idiot, immoral, counterproductive assassins that are going around ambushing cops. Well, of course cops are going to be, on high alert.
Yeah.
So we've created a gun culture where everybody's armed, and guess what happens? Everybody shoots one another.
Right. I mean, you create an environment of paranoia, and everyone is now deemed a threat. And so I think that's the reason why they're quick to shoot. I think that's the reason why you see that portrayed in the way that they're trained, right? Everyone is immediately a threat. You immediately have your hand on your gun as you're approaching a vehicle when you're stopping someone for a citation. Why would you do that? It's because we live in a country that's swimming in guns.